Now, the Scottish First Minister, Nicola Sturgeon, has promised to set out her plans for a second referendum on independence, setting up the future of the Union as one of the major political issues coming down the track. The Labour Party could have a critical role in shaping Scotland's future, but it's been a decade of decline for the party north of the border. Back in 2010, they were the dominant force in Scotland, winning 41 of the 59 seats. But fast forward to last December, and they'd crumbled, winning just one seat in a nation now dominated by the SNP. And hopes for improvement are slim. This poll from last month shows them in third place, on just 14% behind the Conservatives and miles behind Nicola Sturgeon's party. Because of that, pressure is growing on the Scottish Labour leader, Richard Leonard. 4 MSPs and a handful of peers have now openly called for him to resign. But he's vowed to fight on, and he joins us now from Paisley. Thank you very much for being with us. So some of your colleagues, as we mentioned, are calling for you to resign. Are you going to?
No, I'm not. And I think those people that have been calling this week for me to step down have underestimated both my resolve, but also the mandate that I got from the of the Scottish Labour Party. Look, Sophie, prior to my election as the leader just under 3 years ago, we'd had 5 leaders of the Scottish Labour Party in 6 years. And so the mandate that I was given by the members when they convincingly elected me to be the leader was to campaign on a radical agenda, but it was also to be the leader of the Scottish Labour Party going into the May 2021 Scottish Parliament elections.
At the same time, though, surely you can understand why people are concerned. Labour's gone from being the dominant party in Scotland to almost an irrelevance. You won just one Westminster seat in December, you're third in the polls. You can see why people are worried.
Yeah, and this has been part of a long-term trend. But look, the situation that we now face, economic, social and health-wise, because of the pandemic, has really changed the dial of politics. And I think, the people I am speaking to are having sleepless nights because they don't know when the job retention scheme comes to an end at the end of October, whether in December they'll have a job or not. So we are expecting a huge spike in unemployment. We know that there will be enormous pressures on the National Health Service, for example. We know that there has been a crisis in social care. All of these things, I think, are moving people's focus on from some of these constitutional questions. Brexit dominated last December's election, not only in the rest of the UK, but in Scotland as well. I think that there is a new climate of politics in Scotland, which will allow us to start to get our messages across about the need for urgent action to tackle the job crisis. Urgent action to make sure we've got investment in public services like the health service. And I'm sure that when we get to the elections next May, people will understand which is that the sole focus on the next Scottish Parliament and the next Scottish Government has got to be on tackling these big questions. Climate change
so if that's all the case, if that's all the case, then why are people calling for you to go? Are they just a bunch of disaffected Blairites?
Well, look, there are some people who really never accepted the result when I was elected back. There are, I think there are some people who misread the mood of the party membership. I was given a strong mandate when I was elected, and I've had a huge number of messages of support from right across the Labour Party, and people who would consider themselves to be on the centre or the right of the Labour Party, and I would consider myself to be on the left of the Labour Party. So right across the board, there has been a massive, I think, strong message of support for me and for my leadership. And at a very point when the country's in a crisis, 8 months out from an election, the last thing that people want to see is the Labour Party turning itself in on itself. And look,
others might say, with respect though, that the last thing the Labour Party needs is a Scottish leader who is failing to get more than 14% in the polls and is only winning one Westminster seat in December.
Well, when I inherited the party, it was in third place. It still is in third place. But we've got an opportunity here to start to make real progress. And rest assured that I will be campaigning for every see as we go into the elections next year. I will be touring the country over the next few months, speaking to people about the jobs crisis, about what we need to do to solve the unemployment spike that we are likely to face. And that's about job retention. It's about job guarantees. It's about job creation.
You're obviously keen to
Towards
talk
the
about
future.
You're obviously keen to talk about jobs and unemployment in Scotland, but of course another big feature of how people vote is the question of independence. So I just want to really clarify your view. Are you completely opposed to the idea of independence, even if the SNP win a majority in the Scottish Parliament elections next year, which many people would see as a mandate for another referendum?
Well, two things, Sophie. First of all, I do not believe it serves the best interests of the people of Scotland to set up a separate Scottish state. I think, the values of cooperation, solidarity, working together are ones that drive my politics. But secondly, we've said that going into the elections next year, because of the scale of the crisis, the crisis in public services, the need for investment, the priority for the next Scottish Parliament and the next Scottish Government should not be around constitutional questions. It needs to be about solving those social and economic questions. And that's why I've said that we will go into those elections next year opposed to a second independence referendum. Of course, we want reform and modernisation of the British state. It is too centralised. And with Brexit, there are challenges there about how we can get more co-determination between a Scottish government, a Welsh government, a Northern Irish executive and the UK government. There needs to be a greater parity of esteem between those parts of the UK and greater decentralisation.
So just to be crystal clear
I think
then,
that the way forward is for the creation of a separate Scottish state, because I do not.
just to be crystal clear then, even if the SNP win a majority in the elections, will you be opposed to a second referendum on independence in all circumstances?
Well, Sophie, you'll forgive me, but 8 months out from an election, I'm not going to concede the result to the SNP. There will be a reckoning for the SNP's record, both in the handling of COVID and over the last. It said that education was going to be its top priority, and actually, attainment in education, the gap between the poorest areas and the better off areas, that gap is widening. So on their record, whether it's in education, the delivery of public services, on jobs, on green jobs, whether it's their record in the handling of the pandemic and the scandal of what's happened in Scotland's residential care homes, these are big questions which the SNP will be called to account for. And I think when that happens, people will understand that there are alternatives, that there were alternatives, and in the future there is an alternative way that Scotland could be governed.
OK, thank you very much for being on the programme this morning. Richard Leonard there, the leader of the Labour Party in Scotland.